Maritime Matters is brought to you live by Bahamas Maritime Connection.
What is maritime?
Maritime, simply put, relates to navigation or commerce on the high seas.
Some say money makes the world go round. I say ships move the money that make the world move.
Who navigates those large international ships?
How often are international ships required to be surveyed and inspected?
Maritime also protects our seas and borders by way of our local Bahamas Defense
It is
Force.
very sad to say that out of 1,500 plus ships that are registered under the Bahamian flag, only a very small amount of Bahamians are employed.
Maritime Matters.
Hey, guess what today is? Well, you know today is Tuesday. Oi! And it's time for Captain Glenn. Join you ready on? So everyone let's gather around. Cause Maritime Matters. He's a native of Andros. Say what? But he grew up in Nassau. Sail around the Bahamas, all around, with the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Hey! Well, you know today is Tuesday. Oh yeah, and it's time for Captain Glenn. Let's do any boy. So everyone let's gather around your radio. Cause Maritime Matters. Hey! Well, you know today is Tuesday. Say what? And it's time for Captain Glenn. So everyone let's gather. Cause Maritime Matters.
And a pleasant good evening to you, our valued listening audience. Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain. The producer for our show tonight is the great one, the maestro himself, Mr. Kishno Jones. We're coming to you live via Love 97 FM studio. This is Tuesday, the 28th day of July, 2026. And if it's a Tuesday, it's maritime. Tick, 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 tick. Matters. We encourage that if you're driving and tuning with us, please do so cautiously and ensure to take your time in getting wherever it is you are trying to get safely. As the saying goes, drive to arrive alive. Our sponsors for tonight's show are 101 Pharmacy and also Island Care Pharmacy. For all your medication needs, check out my little cuss, Shantia McBride, and her lovely team at 101 Pharmacy in Nassau, and of course, Island Care Pharmacy, up there in the second city of Freeport. Fill your prescription at the store, or send your refills via the online site. Yeah, can't all like that. 1on1pharmacy.com. That's a 101 Pharmacy, all lowercase, all one word. .com. The three locations are East Street South, Charles Sanders Highway, or if you're up in Freeport, it's on Explorers Way, downtown Freeport. We are secondly sponsored by Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited, and at BMC, we provide a full slate of ISPS Maritime Security Services. Good night to my good Auntie May. I'm going to say good old Auntie May. Say, boy, stop calling me old on the radio. Auntie May, good night, honey. Girl, you know, we ain't talk for a little while. I tell Auntie May I was getting away. That's good. But Auntie May, don't worry. You know, we can catch up. We going to catch up, darling. So to my good old Auntie May, 93 years young and getting older. Auntie May, you can't get younger now. You don't have too much on you, man. 93 years old, people, and going strong. Strong? Strong. Continue to do your thing, Auntie May. You know we headed for that big century, that 3-digit number. 100 and plus couple. That's how we could be rolling. Tonight, we engage discussion surrounding the 2026 war in the Gulf. Boy, if you all ain't been following things lately, but this war and how for the past 2 weeks, all kind of heavy artillery is falling on the heads of that country named Iran, and how the U.S. was lashing out and blocking shipping, and the Strait of Hormuz was all locked down, and hardly no fuel could move in or out. Well, they won't go in, out of the Persian Gulf to get to other parts of the world. And now a lot of things have been going on based on this war. In the Red Sea, with the Houthis stringing into action and causing big tankers to turn around and go the other way. Man, let me tell you something. We got some stuff going on tonight. So I want you all, please do call in and let's talk about this thing, man. This thing's serious. And it's impacting us at the pumps. And it's impacting us at BC. And it's impacting us with almost everything we got to pay for. Because the cost of living over the past few months have escalated. Well, many of us starting to choke. Some people who ain't never choked before are now choking, right? Because it ain't easy. So we have a rising cost of fuel. Gas stations are experiencing all kind of crowd. And people say, well, they ain't getting money then. Well, how come we get so much people going for gas? You want me to tell you what's going on? Let me tell you what's going on. Because fuel costs are so high. When you could go to the gas station and put them on $10 gas and that'll carry you for 2-3 days, you put $10 gas and that'll carry you for half a day. Right? And somehow this is causing people to put, even if it's the same amount of money they used to put in the tank before. They're putting it now, but it ain't carrying them as far. They got to keep coming, one after the next after the next. And I'll tell you, just yesterday evening, last night I was in Fort Lauderdale. I can tell you now because I'm back home, right? I was in Fort Lauderdale, and I know this morning I had to return the rental. And I had one of them nice, when you go away, get these snap. Well, all the cars brand new when you go to rent over there. You ain't like over here, you go rent a car, you may get a 3-year-old car. These are 2026 cars, right? And I had this Kia, what it is? Telluride, or anyway, it was one of those station wagon type Kias, right? And I rent that because they said I had no more. What them things they would we like to rent when we go shopping a lot. Those minivan. They had no more minivan, and they give us a 7-seat Telluride, right? And boy, it was nice. I ain't gonna lie, it was nice. Put them seats, throw them seat down, and that's like your normal SUV. So I got the option full it upon returning. They give you one, you can pay for full tank, or you fill it on or bring it back full. So my thing was, I ain't bringing it back full, but in Florida, I know where all the gas stations is and plenty close to the airport, so I could always top that up. When you look, I go pay them for full tank and I only use 3/4 tank. I mean, I rob myself, right? I ain't playing that. But anyway, I go on to the gas station. Was it Amoco? Amoco, I think it was. We like Amoco, some of us like Marathon. But anyway, go on to the gas station. Nice gas station. Pull up, swipe my credit card, gas start pumping. I say, now when I got there, I ain't gonna lie, it was close to empty, right? It was like between Hardy and 1/8. So I had like 2 dits or 2 blips or 2 dip or 2 whatever that thing is you always call it, or your cell phone, 2 bars, 2 something. Anyway, it was low. So I know I need a top up. Man, that thing started racing. I said, okay, race on, buddy, race on. Well, I'm home, so I know it's only cost me a couple dollars anyhow. Do you know that pump didn't stop until it reached $65 and something cents? And I was like, hold on now. $65. I never paid this much money for gas on no one go in the US. So how come? And then gas costs over there like $4 a gallon. You know, I used to pay a little 2 something, right? 1 something, and back in the day we used to pay must be 50 and 60 cents a gallon. Well, that was back in the 80s, but that's what it cost, right? So gas price over $4 causing my little tell you ride to take all $65 out of my shopping money. Anyway, it is what it is. But that goes to tell you, even the Americans, and America got plenty of oil, but even the Americans are feeling it very, very hard at the pumps. And because of that, I think the president and the administration, they're going through some pressure right now because people crying, people screaming out. And we doing the same thing here. But you think our government checking? We crying and screaming out, and some of us basically, we ain't want to catch no bus, right? We a little proud like that. We ain't want to resort to catching no bus. So if we only got putting on $10 or $5 to get from point to point, we'd rather do that. And the thing about it is, if you look at most of the cars on the road, and I don't know how we do it, most of the cars got their glass scrub, they using AC. They know when you turn on the AC now, your gas can run out faster. Boy, but that sounds so hot. Anyway, I don't use AC that much, right? Because I'd be doing little short rides. If I do a little long ride, if I got to go to the airport or go Clifton Pier or go something like that, that AC will turn on, and I can make sure I get enough gas to get me then back. I don't check no how. Whenever I go put on gas, I just fill it up, man. I fill it up and say, well, something else got to suffer, or I got the money. And that's how I roll, right? So I had that bad experience, and all this is because of the rising cost of fuel. And why do you think the cost of fuel is rising so fast? Because of the war in the Persian Gulf. And not just the war in the Persian Gulf. It's because there is controls of fuel coming out of the Persian Gulf. Because all of this war going on now, ships, them big tankers can't pass through the Strait of Hormuz. They can't. They could try, but a couple of them has been bombarded with ballistic missiles and drones. And insurance say we ain't paying because we tell you don't go through there until this war finish. So we need the water de-escalate again, so that ships can start moving through without being threatened with bombs and missiles and drones and mines and everything else war brings about. It's a commercial ship, whether you be a tanker, whether you be a container ship, whether you be a bulk carrier, and they got bulk carriers going in there. Why? What is a bulk carrier? A bulk carrier is those ships that carry rocks and sand and stuff in the belly of the ship and salt, like them ships that go to Morton to get salt, they bulk carriers. Those ones that go to Bahamas Rock to get all that, which y'all won't call aragonite, but I understand it's only limestone, they bulk carriers, right? Excuse me. And so bulk carriers need to, why would bulk carriers need to go into the Persian Gulf? Because in the Persian Gulf, they have a country by the name of Qatar. You know the Yanks. The American folks call it Qatar, right? But the Brits and most people in the world call it Qatar. But they call it Qatar. Because I've been, when I was in Dartmouth, there were a couple people from that country, and they say, I'm from Qatar, right? So Qatar has a large, I think they have like 30% or so of fertilizer that the whole world wants and the whole world uses, right? And without that fertilizer, our trees ain't gonna grow as good and as fast, and our crops ain't gonna be doing. So right now, even the bulk carriers that go to get the fertilizers can't go in and out of the Strait or the Persian Gulf. So this war that is causing fuel to rise because the tankers can't. The Persian Gulf have like over 20% of the world's supply of fuel and natural gas and diesel and gasoline and bunker C and everything, right? Over 20% that the world requires. So now that 20% has been taken away from the puzzle, so that 80% out there that was left now got to take care of 100% of fuel. So it's very tight. Countries are some getting squeezed out. Because to get it, you got to go up. You got to pay more money. And that is what causing the cost of fuel to go up. Because there's a squeeze on those movement of fuel in and out of the Persian Gulf. So the Persian Gulf has a bottleneck. Say the Persian Gulf is a dead end, right? You only get one way in and one way out. You don't go through the Persian Gulf, couple different, like how you could go through a lot of harbors through different entrances. No, this one only get one to come in and you got to come out through the same one. And that area that allows people to get from the Indian Ocean into the Persian Gulf, that area is, or that bottleneck is known as the Strait of Hormuz. And when they say the strait, it's like a little narrow neck. It look like a neck. But it goes right along, right deep close into Iran. So a ship wanting to go through the Strait of Hormuz will have to negotiate Iran being very close to it. And if this war is going on and a ship is going that close to Iran, there's nothing to stop a rogue person in Iran from hitting that ship with a drone or missile or, well, it's hard to say the mines, but they have mines already underwater planted. Mines are things that they could detonate, they could trigger off and cause it to explode underwater and impact the hull of the ship, right? So you don't want no mine going off around your ship because that could cause all kind of problems. So we got the control of the Strait of Hormuz because Iran has so much geopolitical advantage over the Strait of Hormuz because of how close it is to Iran. It's difficult to get around Iran. All those bombs dropping on Iran over the past months, and in particular the past 2 weeks, don't stop them from being a big threat to ships wanting to traverse the Strait of Hormuz. So there's a stoppage. There's a chokehold. There's a bottleneck. There's a situation where, although we have all of that good oil and gas and diesel and all the rest of that in the Persian Gulf, nobody could get it. So the tankers in there got to stay in there. The tankers outside wanting to come in got to stay out. And that, my dear listener, is the crux of the reason why the cost of fuel is so high today and continuing to get high. And as this war go on and the world can't get any of that fuel in the Gulf, the price will continue to rise. And it's going to balance off at some point, but it's going to be very high. And what Iran is doing, it's utilizing that leverage, that geopolitical advantage to say everybody can suffer if we suffer. So as long as the U.S. is dropping bombs on us, nobody getting nothing out of this Persian Gulf. Because you see, Iran is located in such a position that a whole half of the Persian Gulf is occupied by Iran. Is huge. It's a huge country compared to those other ones, eh? Iran and Saudi Arabia, they're huge countries. And they take up, between the two of them, probably 90% of the coastline of the Persian Gulf. Iran taking up more than half. So across from Iran are the other countries directly across the Persian Gulf. And close are the other countries that supplies fuel, gas, diesel, bunker C, call it fuel oil, and that also includes natural gas, LNG, right? And because they are so close to these countries, they can lash out at these countries. Countries like the UAE, or the United Arab Emirates, and that's, as we call it, Dubai, and they got Abu Dhabi further on down the road. They're the two main cities in UAE, right? And they are big oil producers and suppliers. And you got Qatar, or Qatar, which is a big supplier of fuel and, as we said earlier, supplies fertilizers for the world. Then further up we got Bahrain, or Bahrain. Sometimes we get the Bahamas mixed up with Bahrain because BAH, right? But Bahrain is a small country, the tiniest one of all, very tiny. But it has a lot of fuel that it can supply to the world. And it is in the Persian Gulf like all the others. And then we have Kuwait further up the strip. And Kuwait is another little small country that shares the coast between Saudi Arabia and Iraq, right? They got a piece of that coast where they can drill oil or drill for oil and get plenty of oil. So Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain, and also UAE. They're countries that are tiny, small compared to Iran and Saudi Arabia and Iraq and them, right? But they own the Gulf, and they get a lot of fuel, and they supply the world with a lot of fuel. But for them to get their fuel out, it has to pass the Strait of Hormuz. And by passing the Strait of Hormuz, it is under the control. Right now you got to get the blessings, and right now you ain't getting no blessing, because as far as Iran is concerned, ain't nobody moving, nobody get hit, because we just mad, and unless the US eats up off us, we just ain't let no ship use it. And that's what's going on right now. So yeah, there you go. Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Those countries have sections that provide for the United States to put naval bases, not naval bases, but military bases, mainly Air Force or places to keep their military airplanes, right? And they have been strategically being used by the United States to continue its bombardment of Iran. And of course, Iran don't like that. Iran ain't get no big problems with these other Arab nations, right? But as far as they're concerned, if you're allowing the US to use bases on your turf, then you're part of our problem. And they've been sending missiles out at those bases in those countries, etc., etc. And that escalates everything, right? that escalates everything. And so the Persian Gulf is an area that the world depends on for fuel, but right now can't get no fuel from. And that is what is causing the fuel price to be so high. And that is basically controlled by Iran, as I said earlier. And right now there's a big war going on between Iran and the US. Also, Israel is part of it. And until there's a de-escalation of all that war activities, the entire world, including the US, will be faced with high fuel costs. And then, of course, in recent times, the Houthis, because now the country of Saudi Arabia, knowing that the Gulf is closed, or the Strait of Hormuz was locked down, decided to use their western dockage, where they have fuel pipelines running to that, and tankers were getting fuel in the Red Sea. And using that route, which is pretty far from Iran, to continue to sell the fuel to countries around the world. But because of the relationship between Iran and the Houthis, and the Houthis being Yemen, the government or the people that is controlling Yemen right now, the Houthis play a big role in that. And I don't know, you may have recalled last year and the year before last, the Houthis basically locked down the Red Sea. They wasn't letting ships pass through the Suez Canal or come through the Red Sea to get to and from the Suez Canal. So ships had to go all the way around Africa, as opposed to going through the Suez Canal and taking a shortcut to come through the Mediterranean Sea. And the Houthis had desisted. Leading up to this war in the Gulf, the Houthis really was allowing ships to freely pass. But now, the Houthis has been activated by their relationship with Iran to say that we are now going to escalate things in the Red Sea and not allow those tankers to pass. So very recently, the Houthis hit one or two tankers and caused them to turn around and go back out through the Suez Canal because they're not letting them come along Yemen to go out take that shortcut into the Indian Ocean to get to, for example, they would get the fuel from the western dockage of Saudi Arabia. And then they'll come down to take that same fuel that they would have gotten out of the Persian Gulf to countries like India and China and Australia and all the rest of them. But now they can't do that no more because the Houthis say, you ain't coming this way no more. So what they got to do? They got to go back through the Mediterranean Sea and come all the way around Africa to go east to China and the Far East, those areas, Middle East, anywhere beyond the Middle East. Eh? So the problem has even gotten worse. Is there an end to the problem? Is the question. And we know you got the answer. So please hit us up. Feel free to call us. Should you wish to be a part of this discussion, and if you just want to sit back and listen, we down with that. But some of you know about this stuff, and we want you to call in and weigh in. We don't want you to sit back and be scared. Call in and weigh in. Let's discuss it in further details. Let's discuss it as to how we see it. right? So to recap, we got the war in the Gulf where the fuel, based on the war, the cost of fuel is rising because the Strait of Hormuz is not allowing, no ships is allowed to pass there. It's Iran is controlling that, right? And in the Red Sea, where tankers were coming from the west coast of Saudi Arabia to get to the Far East, they can no longer do that. They can come from the west coast and go through the Mediterranean, so they still could go to Europe and go to the US and stuff like that, right? Thank goodness. But they can't come through there as a shortcut. They can go all the way around Africa in order to go east. And while all this is going on, this was based on the US and Israel attacking Iran at the end of February this year. And then there was a de-escalation where an agreement was drawn up between the US and Iran. An agreement that included Israel, of course. And while both sides decided we'll have a 60-day or is it 90-day ceasefire, which happened, it started a ceasefire, until we can iron out this agreement. In the meantime, we'll have freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz, which happened. We back to this Iran-U.S. agreement. The U.S.-Iran agreement where the ceasefire came, and for a few days, a couple of weeks, everything was de-escalated. Ships started to go in and out of the Strait of Hormuz, and then there were attacks again. I think both sides had issues because one of the things that Iran had a further problem with was that Israel was attacking, not Hamas, what's the next one name? Was attacking Lebanon. While the ceasefire is supposed to have happened, that was supposed to stop too, but that didn't stop. And it started to escalate again, and the U.S. decided, we had enough of this. We got to. The U.S. tried to take over the Strait of Hormuz. Now that was short-lived because Iran was able to get some weapons, some artillery off, and all the rest of that. So it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Tonight, of course, we're dealing primarily with international feeds because we're talking about the war in the Persian Gulf. The phone number to reach us, should you wish to get in on the discussions during the show, 326-8255 or 322-3633. That's 322-3633 or 326-8255. To hear a replay of this particular show or any of our previous shows, simply hit us up at any time via our YouTube page. That's Maritime Matters Bahamas. Just go to YouTube on your electronic device and type into the search box Maritime Matters Bahamas. So we continue to talk maritime. And we are talking about the reason why we have a rising cost of fuel, not only in our country, the Bahamas, but also around the entire world. In particular, the United States of America, and I can say in particular because that is where I experienced it yesterday. At the pumps. We always know we got it bad in the Bahamas, but we think that because America also produces oil, it wouldn't be so bad. But boy, I can tell you based on my experience there, it's bad. Now, what is the answer to this whole thing of rising fuel costs? We don't know. Because the mere reason why the fuel costs went so high was because of this war. Nobody can say when this war is going to be finished, because it has been going up and down and up and down. And they had a ceasefire, and then they had crossfires, and then they had another ceasefire, and then they crossfiring again. So we don't know. It seems to be a matter of trust between the countries involved, and the countries involved being the United States, Iran, and of course Israel. Because when the de-escalation occurs, some other escalation starts again, and that kicks in the whole war all over again. And we're all hoping and praying that sometime soon, for the sake of getting fuel costs to be reduced, even if not back to where it used to be, for us to have a normal way of life, at least to where it could be more palatable for people like us who ain't got much money, right? I know I may have some money more than some other people, and some other people may have more money than me, and some other people ain't got no money at all. But the lesser among us is suffering, and suffering harshly. And before the fuel price went up so high, we were talking, and when I say we, I'm talking about the United Nations and the entire world. We're talking or speaking to renewable energy. And what was the reason for us wanting to speak to renewable energy? The world has been experiencing, in pockets after pocket, violent storms, excessive flooding, wildfires, and a lot of natural occurrences that were extremely detrimental and kill a lot of people, hurt a lot of people, cost a lot of people money, and it continues. Like I said earlier, you can hardly drive in your car without turning on air conditioning. You can hardly walk from your house to the bus stop. Now, some must have some far bus stop, but some must have some close bus stop, and you're drenched with sweat. I mean, I don't know how those people who do construction work and working on foundations and footings and they ain't got no shelter, make it in this heat while they doing that type of work. But I believe they should be paid double, you know. Let me tell you something. Just to be in this heat is a beating. And I know everybody that has to go outdoor at some point during the day has been suffering as a result of this heat. Even Annie Mays tell me, boy, Glenn, that heat, I hope you're in that heat, because that heat out there, that heat playing, I gone out there for 2 minutes and I had to run back inside. And Annie Mays says she don't keep air conditioning on all day, but she can't take that heat. That heat is not playing. I know I got one of my sons, he assisted me with some renovation work, right? This dude trying to buy one of them big blower fans. So he went inside there, he need fan, and he got roof over here because the places we renovating, that roof, they didn't finish. And the heat is too much, even with roof over here. And this is because the world is experiencing what we call global warming. And we know that our good friend President Trump is saying, oh, that's a hoax, right? But I think even President Donald Trump is realizing now, because of the amount of forest fires they have in Canada and in certain parts of the US. I drive in a car, even today. And you put your hand, well, you can't put it on the windshield because you can get burned. But you put it near the windshield and you feel that intense heat coming from the side glass of the windshield. And you'd be like, boy, there's some serious heat. And that is what it is. It's very serious. I don't know how bus drivers and taxi drivers make it. Well, maybe taxi drivers, they drive it with air conditioning. Some of these bus drivers most of these bus drivers ain't got no air conditioning for the bus, right? And they on the road driving in this heat. And like I say, you get construction workers and things like that. How they make it in this heat, I really don't know. Because this heat is that intense. And so we need to stop the heat somehow. We need to let the day-to-day heat in the summertime go back to what it used to be when we was growing up, when we were younger, the years gone by, right? It never used to be this intense. And so we know that the reason for this heat is what we refer to as global warming. Because what happens is, well, you know, heat comes from the sun, right? Heat comes from the sun. And when the sun is steaming in the daytime, the core of the earth gets hot. And so when the sun passes over us to the next side or section of the world, and it gets dark because we're no longer getting that sunlight, the heat from the core of the earth that we experience on our side starts to leave the earth and rise, because we know heat rises, right? And that heat rises and goes out of the earth's atmosphere into space. And so when the sun comes all the way back around 24 hours later, the sun brings a new set of heat and heats up the core of the earth again. So it's a cycle where the core of the earth will heat up during the daytime with the direct sunlight. Excuse me. And when nighttime rolls around, that heat escapes from the earth and finds its way out of the earth's environment into space, right? But what has been happening lately is the heat trying to leave at night is blocked. And you might ask, what do you mean it's blocked? It's blocked because over the years, after man-made machinery, the machines will give off carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, but carbon-based exhaustion. Because whether you know it or not, machinery uses oxygen to combust and cause that explosion to cause things to turn, to give us energy. And the byproduct after that heat, after that oxygen is utilized, it converts it to carbon dioxide to give off. So the oxygen is used just like us humans. When we inhale, we take in oxygen. And that oxygen combines with other things to give us energy, eh? And then once we burn that energy, and we exhale the carbon, or carbon dioxide as we call it. So we take in the oxygen, get some energy, utilize it for locomotion or for energy, and then we release the byproduct, which is the carbon. And the trees, which are our friends, take in carbon dioxide and they process it for their use and their energy, and they release oxygen. So it's a cycle between us and the trees. They take in carbon dioxide and give us oxygen. We take in oxygen and give them carbon dioxide. And then that's just a small way of putting it, right? But everything balances out. So because of all that carbon being introduced by machinery, because now the world already had a balance before machinery was introduced by man. But we have machinery for almost everything. We have cars, we have generators to generate electricity, we have planes and boats, and so we got a lot of machinery that we depend on that uses carbon, uses oxygen, and gives up. So while those machinery was introducing all this carbon to the world, over a period of time that built up, and the carbon actually absorbs heat. So when that carbon goes and then absorbs the heat, it sits and it no longer goes outside of the Earth's atmosphere. And because of that, because it doesn't get outside of the Earth's atmosphere, it stays and it blocks. It forms a blockade. Right now we have a big blockade around Earth, keeping the heat here that should be escaping at night. And so when the sun comes and heat up the Earth core all over again, what you get? You get more heat coming up and being trapped, and more heat coming up and being trapped. So the heat, because the heat is being trapped, that trapped heat combines with the other heat and causes it to get so much hotter. And it creates disturbances. That's why we're having more violent hurricanes. That's why we're having floods in places. That's why we're seeing rain pop up in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes we'd be like, boy, this has been all day. That bunch of that rain was so heavy. So we're seeing all these disturbances, and we know this ain't normal. So to combat that, the United Nations decided. The United Nations, the UN, the big chief of the world, decided that we got to do something about all this carbon. We got to find a way to rid the Earth of this carbon. And that's why you see when they talk about carbon credits, because we have this big, large banks with seagrass. The seagrass actually absorbs carbon out of the air. And they don't only absorb it out of the air like the trees do, but they absorb it 35 times faster than the trees. And because we have so much seagrass meadows, the trend of thought was, boy, we save an Earth. You know how much carbon we taking out there? If we didn't take all that out there, it would have been worse with this global warming. So we feel like, since we got so much banks with all the seagrass, we got about, like how the Persian Gulf got like 20% of all the world fuel. We got like 20% of all the world carbon seagrass meadows. So we got the largest in the world, right? And while our seagrass is taking all, we're not getting anything for it. And that is the crux of why we were having the argument we need to be paid for what our seagrass is doing. But unfortunately, that ain't happened. Because the United Nations decided we're not paying for any Mother Nature taking carbon out of that. Was always taking carbon out of and 1,000 years from now, the carbon I'm going to still be taken out of the air by Mother Nature. We're paying for when you mitigate the amount of carbon that you send into the environment. And so we can't get no money or credit for our carbon being dissolved or taken out of the environment by our carbon, by our seagrass meadow. So we could put that baby to rest, right? And I keep telling people that. But back to global warming. To combat this global warming, and I'm going to move to break real soon, right? But to combat this global warming, the world came up with two primary things. We have to use Mother Nature to give us the same energy we're getting from fossil fuel that emits carbon. We need to do something to say we could have the same energy, but we ain't gonna be emitting no carbon. And Mother Nature provides wind for us to get wind energy. Mother Nature provides the sun for us to get solar energy. And so we have become on a mission, that the whole world is now on a mission where we need to trade off all that fuel, fossil fuel, natural gas, diesel. We need to trade that off for renewable, what we call renewable energy. Renewable energy is solar panels, wind farms, things that can give you energy without carbon being let off as a result. And so you see all the EVs or the electric vehicles being produced and being made available to us. Because when you get an electric vehicle, you ain't got no muffler, you ain't got no engine, you ain't got no oil, you ain't got no gas, you are not emitting any carbon dioxide. And the thing is, vehicles provided more than 28% of carbon worldwide. So out of the 100% carbon that all these machinery and stuff was emitting into the environment, 28% out of that was coming from the cars we drive and the machinery, like tractors, trains and all that, vehicles. 28%. And then between the planes and the ships, that was another 5%. Well, of course, you get these plants like BEC and these providers of electricity worldwide that has the lion's share of emitting carbons into the environment. So when they turn to solar and wind farms, we ain't hardly have no more of that going on. So that being said, we need to strike the balance between how soon the world is going to wean itself away from the use of fossil fuel, the diesel, the gas, the bunker C, and also included in that the diesel, the gas, and the bunker C is natural gas. We need to rid ourselves of all that. And once we do that, we'll be on the right track. And this Gulf, in the Persian Gulf, this war that's going on now in the Persian Gulf, wouldn't mean much to us because we wouldn't be depending on that gas. And it's going to happen soon, and we can talk about that right after we go to this break. Expect some phone calls right after that, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain. Producer for the night, Mr. Krishno Jones. And Krishno is here to take us into our first break. Thank you.
At One-on-One Pharmacy, our friendly staff is ready to serve you. Visit us today for all your prescription and over-the-counter needs at our East Street South or Charles Saunders Highway locations. We're open Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and from 9 to 4 on Sundays. In a rush? Send your refill scripts online at oneononepharmacy.com or ask about our convenient pickup service. One-on-One Pharmacy, providing personal health care with people at heart. At Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited, we offer first-class maritime security services throughout the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean. As experts in maritime security, we specialize in production of ISPS assessments and plans, verification audits, certified familiarization training, and port security consultancy, just to name a few. Our services also include provision of a security force to maintain all required ISPS facility security compliance. For all your maritime security needs, visit us today in Nassau at our East Street South location or in Freeport in the Kipling Building. Call us at 392-3515 or follow us on all social media platforms. Bahamas Maritime Connection, your leader in maritime security. Let's help you make the connection.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. You are listening to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain. At this point I want to apologize to those two people tried to call in on the show and somehow the numbers didn't come true, or the call didn't come true. But I would implore those persons to call back at 322-5477. I would really appreciate if you try and reach us, 322-5477. We're still on topic. We're going to talk some more about renewable energy. We're going to talk some more about the war in the Persian Gulf, and etc. Right? So we got time left, and we're going to be looking for those calls to come back. Ladies and gentlemen, I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain, and Kishno Jones is on the Wheel of Steel producing us for the night. And let me just recap. We are talking about a 2026 war in the Gulf. We are talking about why the cost of fuel continue to rise. And we know that this has something to do with this war in the Persian Gulf. What we need to understand are some of the details. For example, no fuel can move out of the Persian Gulf as we speak because there is a war going on, and 20+% of the fuel that is supplied to the world is basically being strangled as a result of those big, large tanker ships that we know of not being able to traverse the Strait of Hormuz, which is basically in the belly of Iran. You cannot pass the Strait of Hormuz without going very, very close to Iran. Because of the war, lashing out at ships and trying to put a squeeze on whatever they could put a squeeze on, and that is putting a squeeze on the fuel cost worldwide. And for that reason, I think negotiations are being made between the U.S. and Iran. Everybody wants something out of the deal. And the U.S. is demanding that there be freedom of navigation and that Iran has no nuclear capacity, no capability to even go and put a nuclear plant or nuclear weapon together. And Iran is saying, we need you to end the hostilities. We don't want no more bombs dropping on our head. We don't want no more attacks on Lebanon as we speak from the Israelis. We want you to move all those naval ships you get out there. The naval blockade needs to stop. We need you to lift all those financial sanctions you got on us. And we need you to give us $3 $300 plus billion so that we could reconstruct all this damage that was levied on us based on this war that we didn't start. And there was a sum of the demands that has to be ironed out in order for this thing to come to a close. And, every day I think we're getting negotiations going on to try and bring this to a close, but we don't know exactly when it's going to happen. But as it goes on, the cost for us to buy fuel and for us to pay electricity and all the rest of that are going to keep going up. There was a big meeting today. A big meeting between President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the U.S. because Prime Minister Netanyahu went to the U.S. for the state funeral, among many other delegates from all over the world, right? And since he's there was a big meeting. Lasted an hour and a half. And everybody really want to know what's the conclusion of that meeting. Is there a conclusion to that meeting? Okay, things that were discussed is the fact that Israel is about to have their elections. And of course, the midterm election coming up in the U.S. as well. And these things are all being impacted by the rising cost of living, particularly fuel, worldwide. And we talk about what happens a few years down the road pertaining to renewable energy to wean the world away from the dependency on fossil fuel. Because, as I said earlier, we're having very vicious storms. We're having a lot of acts of nature that has gotten a lot worse than they were in the past. When we speak about wildfires, speak about earthquakes, we speak about hurricanes, typhoons. These things are more vicious than they used to be in the past. Floodings. And we know, or we have reason to suspect, that these things are getting far worse than they used to be, because the earth is being impacted by global warming or heat that is not escaping the earth. And we discussed how that heat is trapped based on all that carbon that was released over the past couple decades after man-made machine. And that put so much carbon in there that the earth doesn't really have an answer, because when the heat is trying to escape, the carbon blocks the heat, and then new heat comes the next day, and the heat intensifies even more so. And like you say, you go outside any day now, especially in the summer, even in the winter, sometimes. You can't take the heat. It's just far worse than it used to be. We were able to take it some time back. But it's not easy now, eh? It's a lot. And it's being said that the world, by 2035, it's going to do a lot of things to wean itself. For example, governments have pledged, our government included, based on those Conference of the Parties meetings, the COP21, COP28, COP30 COP this, COP that. Those COP meetings or COP meetings are where the entire world get together at the United Nations to kind of press on how we are going to move forward with renewable energy. And the big one being the EVs, because that was 28%. And it's being said that the year 2035 will be the year when companies will not be allowed to continue making combustible engines. In other words, those car engines and plane engines and boat engines and generators and no machinery that gives off carbon would be allowed to be produced after 2035. So you get up until 2035. And of course, once it's already produced, you can maintain it, keep it going, blah, 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 blah. But no new ones are going to be produced after 2030. So they're not going to be making combustible engine vehicle or internal, I call it ICE, internal combustible engine vehicles after 2035. That's stopped. So you'll be making only EVs. And the combustible engines that we have, we will hope, because eventually you can find no parts. Eventually they're saying it'll be no more use. And then they can start taxing you for using them, for putting carbon in the environment, for any kind of machinery you use. There'll be, the United Nations will be, by way of countries, taxing you for that. So you'll have to pay just to put your car on the road that is not an EV. So it's going to become far cheaper, because we see it now. If we're looking now, we will see that it's far cheaper to utilize an EV than it is to operate an ICE as a vehicle with internal combustible engine, ICE. It is far cheaper with EV because, yes, you got to charge your EV every so often, once a week, twice a week, once every 2 weeks, whatever, according to how much runs you make, right? And when you're charging that, you plug it into BPL. But that BPL charge is not as expensive as filling your tank. So if you're spending $200, well, it'd be more than that now, you would probably be $300-400 a month to keep gas in your car. It will cost you about half of that on your electricity bill based on plug it in your electric vehicle every now and then. So again, it's already cheaper. The cost to purchase a brand new EV, they got them now under $30,000 a year. I mean, a car. If you get an EV for under $30,000, and then they're coming down, it's going to be under 25, then under 20, you can't find no internal combustible engine car for less than 20 grand or less than 25 grand these days, right? So they'll become even cheaper to purchase than the internal combustible engine vehicle. So by 2035, and we only in 2026, and our government has pledged. By the way, if you want to reach the show, we implore you to call 322-5477. You will get through on that number. The other numbers we've been having a little problems with, but 322-5477. Please call that particular number, and let's continue this discussion. Please let us know how you feel about the things that we're discussing today. Because I get a feeling like, you all just want me to talk. But I know some people are trying to call it. And I know some people know this stuff even better than I do, right? So let's discuss it. And like I say, our government has pledged to the world, by way of the United Nations, that no government vehicle is going to be ICE after 2030. Government will only have EVs or red plates. EVs after 2030. Now, government have already started to buy or acquire a whole heap of EVs, and we see it every day. You see red lights on the road that are EVs. And next year and year after, and the good thing about it is the administration that made that pledge at the United Nations COP 25 or 24, whatever one that was, is the existing administration, because we repeated our government. So they're the ones who are going to be carrying us into 2030, eh? So those pledges can more readily be met by those who made the pledge. Although governments are continuous, and no matter which one of them made the pledge, it's supposed to have been kept, it's easier for the one that pledged to keep the pledge, eh? So we ain't got to worry about that. And the government also pledged that by 2030, all government-owned buildings are going to be operated by solar. By solar. So BPLA will be feeding those buildings, or even if it's hooked up, solar will be taking the load for the government buildings. And, the government could only pledge what the government have control over. But I always say, what I think the government needs to do is to take it a step further. Right? And instead of putting all this 200, 300, I think it's now $400 million into a regasification plant at Clifton Pier, to say that we're going to have LNG, that's liquefied natural gas, come into Clifton Pier and convert it to just natural gas, the vapor, for use with our power plant, BPL. I say, why don't we just go straight to solar for BPL to use? So that it's going to be cheaper. Plus, we're not going to be putting any carbon in there. And then our country can go to the United Nations and say, we have mitigated the amount of carbon we were putting in the environment, because we now go from zero emissions for BPL, and we came down from all the emissions we were doing. So that mitigation you now need to give us credit for. So that's how we can get carbon credits. Mind you, they ain't that much because we only a little small fry, right? But at least we'll be getting something for it, for that mitigation. So let's go straight, instead of going from fossil fuel to LNG, which is about 40% fossil fuel anyhow. Let's come straight down to solar. Straight to solar. And all of us, we wouldn't be depending on how much fuel costs, because we ain't need no fuel for BPL. Our light bill ain't have to have no surplus on it for fuel cost. No, because we ain't buying no fuel. The sun is going to give us energy. And if we can utilize what we have as far as our rooftops to put solar panels on, and the government give us a little bit of incentive, because all I'm saying got that $2, right? We may only have one. A little incentive that if we use our roof to put solar panels on, instead of spending that $400 million by putting a regasification, they will help us get some solar panels that we can pay them for by way of feeding back to the grid from those same solar panels, eh? Feeding back to the grid. And if everybody feeding back to the grid in the daytime, then BPL don't have to find that much power to provide when nighttime come for us to keep things going. And we're talking power where we would all benefit, as opposed to we only getting partial benefit because of decisions made by those in authority, eh? So when we talk about renewable energy, we talk about EVs, we talk about solar. In some countries they're using wind farm, because you got some countries that are not in the solar belt, eh? That the sun don't hit year round. They need windmills because the windmills are a lot stronger than our wind, and they turn those windmills, and while those windmills are being turned by the wind, they are creating energy, and they can feed that to their electrical, what do we call it, to feed all their homes and whatnot with electricity. We call it a grid, electrical grid. And then, in addition to solar and windmills, there's hydrogen power, hydropower, where water from the sea could be used to split the atoms and create energy. Of course, that's a little more expensive than wind and solar. And then we got the big one, right? That 10% of the world's energy was already being utilized, and they anticipate that by 2035 that's going to go to 20%. So we're talking about nuclear power, commercial nuclear power, because I want you to know that France, more than 70% of the power that France provides to their citizens comes from solar plants. Remember, Tokyo had a very big solar plant right on the water, and the tsunami come and hit it. And they were hoping that, it didn't shift enough for the nuclear to get out of it. You see, nuclear is a dangerous thing. And a nuclear fallout, once nuclear get in the environment, whatever touches it kills. So we got to package that nuclear to the extent where it's safe and it wouldn't get out to be able to cause mass deaths, right? And there we go. The fuel cost is rising, and at the same time we're talking about renewable energy. So in 2035, if the US was making this attack on Iran in 2035, Iran wouldn't be able to cause the world to suffer by way of causing fuel prices to go up. Because the world would need fuel. The world will be depending on solar and windmills and hydro and nuclear and EV batteries, big batteries that will take place of machinery, engines and whatnot. So the timing of this war in the Persian Gulf is a big deal. And not only is the timing a big deal, when you look at beyond 2035, where these countries in the Persian Gulf, countries like Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, Iran even, Saudi Arabia, where are they going to now be getting all this money from that they get? Because the countries ain't going to need the fuel no more. And that's one of the reasons why most of these countries were turning to tourism. Like Dubai. Well, UAE, Dubai and Abu Dhabi have been really setting up shop by getting the tallest building in the world, the biggest malls in the world, the fanciest airports in the world. And they wasn't doing this out of all the fuel money they have because they just feel like sure. They were doing this because they know that another decade or so, the amount of money they make in fuel now, that can stop. Because the world ain't got any need fuel if they got all this solar, wind farm, nuclear and hydro giving energy, and all the cars don't need gas no more, all of my EVs. And that's going to be what we call the big change. And so these countries in the Persian Gulf that are so wealthy from fossil fuel, they're going to still be wealthy, but they're not going to be deriving wealth from fossil fuel 10 years down the road. But I want you to know at the same time that tourism, people want to go there to see all of this attraction. So that tourism is going to keep them going, eh? Maybe not as much and highly unlikely as much as they were making from the fossil fuel. But it will be sustainable and all the rest of that, right? Now, in the next 5 minutes, we got to say, who is going to be making the money or the wealth from this renewable energy? It'll be a combination of countries. But the primary country that's going to benefit as a result of the world moving to renewable energy is the country that is going to be supplying most of the material to create renewable energy. That country happens to be China. Because when you think about solar, most of the minerals from the earth comes out of China. Most of the solar panels are purchased from China. Most of the electric vehicles and the batteries for them are purchased from China. Most of the windmills, blades, etc., are being purchased from China. So China has that edge or that head start because they have the rare earth minerals, because they have the manufacturing capacity. So there'll be a major shift in wealth from the Persian Gulf to countries like China, because the world will still need the energy, and renewable energy will be the new source of energy that the world needs. And of course, over time, other countries will get involved and it'll become a competition and all the rest of that. But from the initial onset, the country that stands to gain based on the renewable energy implementation is China. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that, I said we didn't get hardly any calls. I know some people were trying to get through, and I humbly apologize. And I only wish I knew who they were and how I could engage them and how I could apologize to them. But it was not meant to happen. Okay, we got a call coming in now, is it? No. No call coming in now. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we move to close, I want to say good night to my good old Annie Mae. Annie Mae, good night again, Annie. Good night to you. I want to say thank you to my sponsors, Bahamas Maritime Connection, Island Care Pharmacy up there in Freeport, and 101 Pharmacy here in Nassau. I want to say thank you to my good producer, Mr. Kishno Jones, and most importantly to you, dear listener. I want to thank you for continuing to listen and support Maritime Matters. With that, as always, we say to you, Maritime Matters. Tick, 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 tick. Out.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes.